Today's signing of Willian has got me thinking about players who've played for both Chelsea and Arsenal. In this video, I look at some of those players. Hello and welcome back to my channel over and over and over again, which features everything to do with Arsenal. I just wanted to make this video really following the signing of Willian today from Chelsea, just to look back on a few of the players that have played for both clubs in recent years. There's been quite a history between us of signing each other's players, so I just thought I'd maybe go over a few and see who got the best kind of deal really from them. The first player I can actually remember, the first former Chelsea player that I can remember Arsenal signing, was John Hollins. He signed for Arsenal in 1979. Now, we did buy him from Queen's Park Rangers, but prior to that he had spent a long time at Chelsea from 1963 to 1975, played over 500 games for Chelsea. He came to Arsenal towards the end of his career, but he was the ultimate professional, brilliant player, gave everything all the time, great influence on the younger players. He did leave Arsenal in 1983 and went back to Chelsea actually for a year before eventually becoming their manager as well. But obviously, most of his career was at Chelsea, but he certainly played a big part at Arsenal as well. I thought he was a good player that we signed there, so I think that was quite a good deal that we got there. Going back a little bit further, of course, one of the most famous names in Arsenal history originally came from Chelsea, and that was, of course, George Graham. He started off at Chelsea in 1964, played there for a couple of years before joining Arsenal in 1966, where he stayed until 1972. Of course, he won the Fairs Cup at Arsenal, won the double in 1971, and of course later returned as manager in 1986 and won another 6 trophies as Arsenal manager. Now, I don't remember too much about his playing career at Arsenal and don't remember anything at all before my time, but obviously I have great memories of him as Arsenal manager, so we certainly came out better in that deal, didn't we, from Chelsea. Another player who was maybe a bit of a Chelsea legend who came to Arsenal, again that was in the 1970s, was Alan Hudson. Of course, we got him from Stoke City, but he'd been at Chelsea from 1968 to 1974. We bought him in 1976. Obviously a maverick character, really talented player, but again a little bit before my time. I don't remember seeing him play for Arsenal. I've seen a few clips of him, and clearly I say a really talented player, but maybe wasn't prepared to work very hard, and he enjoyed the other side of life, I suppose. And he went over to America, didn't he, when he left Arsenal, and he did end up back at Chelsea again in the mid-80s briefly. So obviously it is the best part of his career was obviously spent at Chelsea, so it was only a brief time at Arsenal. Another player who was an Arsenal legend actually, who ended up at Chelsea, was Graham Rix. Of course, he played for Arsenal for a number of years in the late 70s all the way through the 80s. Won the FA Cup in 1979, of course set up the winning goal in that game if you remember. Came through Arsenal's youth system. He did end up at Chelsea towards the end of his career. He also ended up managing Chelsea, didn't he, briefly as well. I think he was caretaker manager there for a while. But again, he's more of an Arsenal legend, isn't he? And he did run into a few personal issues as well while he was at Chelsea. So, but again, you know, he was a player who did feature for both clubs. Someone who I featured yesterday actually as another player who sort of played for both clubs, if you can call it that, Clive Allen. He didn't actually play a competitive game for Arsenal, but he did join Arsenal in 1980. He wandered through most London clubs, didn't he? So it was obvious he'd end up eventually at Chelsea, and he did. In 1991, he briefly played for Chelsea as well. But obviously, the bulk of his career will be remembered probably for his time at Queen's Park Rangers and Tottenham, although he did play briefly for both Chelsea and Arsenal. Another player from the 80s as well, I remember, Peter Nicholas. Arsenal signed him from Crystal Palace and indeed sold him back to Crystal Palace, but later on in his career, in 1988 to 91, he did play for Chelsea briefly as well. So I wouldn't say he necessarily hit heights at either of those clubs, and he's probably more well known for his time at Crystal Palace, I would say. But again, he's another player that's played for both clubs. Colin Pates was another one. I'm sure Arsenal fans of a certain age will remember him, not necessarily because of how great he was for Arsenal, but just for one particular goal that he scored for us against Benfica in the European Cup in 1991, where he ended up losing to Benfica that night, but he did put us ahead which led to some great celebrations in the clock end that night. We actually signed him from Charlton in 1990, but he did play for Chelsea for quite a long time, 1979 to 1988. He made a lot of appearances for Chelsea. So obviously he's a lot more highly thought of there than his brief time at Arsenal, which never really took off for him, unfortunately. Another Arsenal legend who did end up playing for Chelsea briefly was, of course, David Rocastle. He played most of his career at Arsenal, didn't he? Came through the youth ranks, brilliant player for Arsenal, won the league twice, didn't he? Won the League Cup in 1987. Of course, he left Arsenal for Leeds in 92, went to Manchester City before ending up at Chelsea in 94. Although he was there for 4 years, it was only really one decent season he had there before injuries disrupted his career. He did, of course, play in the semi-final of the Cup Winners' Cup in 95. Had Chelsea won, of course, he would have played against Arsenal in the final. But again, he's more of an Arsenal legend than a Chelsea legend, isn't he? And I don't really want to associate him with Chelsea, if I'm honest. But he did, unfortunately, end up playing for them, didn't he? Very, very briefly at the end of his career. We'll then move on to more recent times. There seems to have been quite a lot more movement between the clubs, actually, in recent times. I mean, Manuel Petit was one, wasn't he? He came to Arsenal in 1997, had 3 really good seasons alongside Patrick Vieira in midfield before he did leave for Barcelona just for a year. But then he came back to English football with Chelsea in 2001 and played for Chelsea for 3 years. He never really hit the heights with Chelsea that he had done with Arsenal. So again, I would say probably Arsenal maybe got the better out of Emmanuel Petit. Really great player for Arsenal. Fantastic he was in that short time that he played. And I say he never really recaptured that with Chelsea, did he? Another player who played alongside Manuel Petit, another player I featured in a video recently, Nicolas Anelka, of course, had a good early spell at Arsenal, didn't he? Helped us win the double in 1998. Drifted around for a few years, ended up at Chelsea in 2008. Spent 4 decent seasons there, actually. Won another double there. Won a golden boot as well. So as I said in my video about him, he's probably better remembered for his time at Chelsea than at Arsenal, although of course it was Arsenal that kick-started his career. But Chelsea maybe got the better out of him in the end, perhaps than what we did, but it's probably quite similar. But then move into, say, more recent times. 2006, of course, saw that swap deal, didn't it, between Ashley Cole and William Gallas. Of course, it hit the headlines a lot, didn't it, at the time. Ashley Cole, of course, one of the greatest English left-backs in history, one of Arsenal's greatest ever players, obviously won the double and was part of the Invincible team as well. So he was a big loss for us. Of course, he went on to have a really successful career at Chelsea as well, didn't he? In fact, he played more games for Chelsea than he did for Arsenal in the end. But I still consider him to be an Arsenal legend despite the way he left. And of course, Gallas never really, his career never really flourished at Arsenal, did it? He was made captain, but of course he had that famous incident at that Birmingham City game when he sat down on the pitch when we conceded a late goal. He was stripped of the captaincy soon after, and in the end he did stay at Arsenal for 4 years, but there was notes of fallouts with players like Kolo Touré and stuff like that, and he left under a bit of a cloud and never really hit the heights with Arsenal. Although I thought he was a reasonably good player, but I think Chelsea definitely had the best from him. If we move on to another player that maybe didn't really hit the heights at either club, Lassara Diarra. I don't know if you remember him. He briefly played for Arsenal in the 2007-2008 season. Looked really good, actually, but he moved on very quickly to Portsmouth. We'd actually got him from Chelsea. He'd been at Chelsea for 2 years. Didn't really play much for them either. So I don't think they probably look at him in any great esteem either. I thought he was a good player when he played for us. He just didn't stay long enough. He could have been a really good player for us, I believe, in the midfield. But I say he left sort of quite soon as well. So he never really made a name for himself at either club, did he? Moving on to Yossi Benayoun. Do you remember him? Obviously, he was a Chelsea player. Previously played for Liverpool. We actually got him on loan from Chelsea for the 2011-2012 season. I thought he was a great player for us, actually. Really, really good. Scored a few goals. Decent player. I'd have been quite happy to have bought him permanently after that, but we didn't. But he had a decent season with us. He's probably more well known probably for his time at Liverpool, I guess. But he did spend quite a long time at Chelsea. He was at Chelsea for 3 years. And I say, although 1 year at that time he did spend at Arsenal. So I have good memories of Yossi Benayoun. Some great goals that he scored for us as well. So I think we did okay on that for that loan, didn't we, that we had with him. The next one I want to move on to, Cesc Fabregas, of course. absolute legend at Arsenal. Brilliant player. One of the greatest players I've ever seen play for the club. He stayed at Arsenal for a long time. Again, he was in the Invincibles squad, but it wasn't really till after the Invincibles that he came into the team. Unfortunately, the team were maybe going downhill a little bit when he came into the side. He stood out a mile, didn't he? He was one of the bright sparks of all of that period, really, that transition from the Invincibles to the Emirates move and all that kind of stuff. Again, he didn't move directly from Arsenal to Chelsea, did he? He had a couple of years in Barcelona. In the meantime, he went back to Chelsea in 2014. I know there was rumours of him coming back to us, but he did go to Chelsea. Again, he had more success there, didn't he? In fact, he won more trophies at Chelsea than he did at Arsenal. But I can't think of him being anything other than an Arsenal legend. So that's how I look at him. Although he did give Chelsea some good times as well, didn't he? Obviously, getting a bit more up to date now. Petr Cech, of course, was again another Chelsea legend, wasn't he? Played over 400 or 500 games for Chelsea between 2004 and 2015 before he came to us. I thought at the beginning he was still a decent goalkeeper, wasn't he? I think he won the Golden Gloves in his first season with us. He was in, obviously, the squad that won the FA Cup in 2015 and 2017, although of course he didn't play in either final. And he was part of the whole Arsene Wenger, the end of Arsene Wenger and the transition. Of course, he lost his place, didn't he, under Unai Emery quite early on to Bernd Leno. Never really got his place back, and then of course he did play in the Europa League final, didn't he, against Chelsea, his final game before retiring, and we all know how that went. So obviously his best years were with Chelsea, there's no doubt about that. But you know, he still gave us one or two decent seasons, didn't he, before he retired. A player that switched the other way, Olivier Giroud. Of course, I thought he was a great player for Arsenal from 2012 to 2018. Scored over 100 goals. Was part of the 3 FA Cup winning side, wasn't he? 2014, 2015, 2017. Of course, he set up the winning goal in 2 of those finals as well for Aaron Ramsey. Thought he was a great player for us. He took a lot of stick. Don't know why. Maybe because he lacked a bit of pace. He didn't look maybe like a modern footballer in many ways, but he was a brilliant player for us, I thought. Scored a lot of goals. And of course, he joined Chelsea in 2018 in the January window. And he's done well for Chelsea. He hasn't maybe hit the same heights he did for Arsenal, but he scored a lot of important goals for them. Of course, if you remember that Europa League final, in 2019, it was Giroud, of course, who scored one of Chelsea's goals in that 4-1 victory. But of course, we did gain our revenge a few weeks ago, didn't we, when we beat them in the FA Cup final. But again, I think maybe we had the better of Giroud's career than what Chelsea have had. He's still there now. I'm sure he'll still do a job for them, get some goals for them in the next coming year or two. But I've got good memories of Giroud at Arsenal. And of course, you've got the final two, which of course last year David Luiz moved from Chelsea to Arsenal. No, he took a lot of criticism, actually, didn't he? He's took a lot of criticism all season, but for me, I think he's had a good season. He was magnificent in the FA Cup, particularly the semi-final and the final. And I think that his experience has been really useful to a lot of the young players. Of course, you know, he had two spells at Chelsea, didn't he, between 2011, 2014, and then 2016 to 2019. Won a lot of trophies with them, Premier League titles and stuff like that, FA Cups. So he's probably more looked on as having the best of his career at Chelsea, but he's had a good first season at Arsenal. Hopefully, now we've got him for another season, he can have another successful season and finish his career on a high. But he's probably more of a Chelsea legend than Arsenal, isn't he? And of course, we move up to date now with Willian. Just made that change now. He's been at Chelsea 7 years, won 5 trophies with them. You know, he's been a really good player. Let's hope that he ends up giving us at least a couple of good seasons before he retires. But I mean, whatever happens, I suppose he's always going to go down more of a Chelsea legend. And we do seem to have got a few players from Chelsea that have been approaching the end of their careers in recent years. You know, I say Petr Cech and David Luiz in particular, and now Willian. Let's hope that Willian can maybe go on to have a little bit more, certainly be a little bit more highly thought of amongst the fans, because I didn't feel the other two really got accepted. Haven't got accepted that much in David Luiz's case as yet. Hopefully Willian can come in and make that difference. So that there is just a few players that I can remember playing for both clubs. Some a little bit before my time as well, but maybe had a bit of a history a part of history of both clubs, and I say more up to date as well, some of the more modern ones. So that's brought back a few memories for you. I just thought I'd throw that one in today, just with obviously the new signing of Willian. If you like the content on this channel, please like, share and subscribe. But I'll be putting out lots of different stuff. I'm trying a few different things, looking at a few different videos to do, a few different subjects to talk about. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. I look forward to giving you some more content as well coming up. Obviously the new season starting soon, so I'll be looking at a Community Shield preview as well. I'll be doing that probably next week or so, and hopefully there'll be some more exciting transfer news to bring you as well in the next few days. And still waiting for that Aubameyang contract. What you're doing? Come on, Arsenal, get that sorted out, please, so we can move on with that as well, which has been hanging over us a bit now, isn't it? Anyway, that's that for this video. So please like, share and subscribe to my channel. In the meantime, as always, come on you Gunners.